Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now the first race of the 2021 Formula One season is just days away now, and so I've been thinking a little bit about which drivers I'm most excited about seeing out on track, or at least the drivers that intrigue me the most this year. So I thought I'd share a few of my thoughts with you all in a list of 5 drivers to keep an eye on this season. Super quick disclaimer though before we get going, this list does not include Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen because quite frankly, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of them this year and the idea of those two going head to head is just exciting enough without me having to sit here and overthink it all too much. But anyway, without further ado, here are my 5 drivers to watch in 2021. First up, Sergio Perez. Alright, yes, I'll admit this one probably falls under the obvious pick category. But Checo is, without doubt, a driver to keep a very close eye on this season. The Mexican, in case you've somehow missed it, has joined Red Bull for 2021 and has probably got one of the toughest tasks ahead of him. Not only does he have to try and tame what is, if we believe what we've heard over the last 2 years, a very difficult car to drive, he's also got to go up against Max Verstappen, so it is not going to be an easy year for him. Not that any year is ever really easy for any driver. But Checo is being patient, saying that he feels he will need 5 races to get fully up to speed in that second Red Bull. So initially, we may not see a huge step up versus what we saw from Gasly and Albon, but once he is up to speed, I have no doubt he will give the Dutchman more of a challenge than he's faced since Daniel Ricciardo left the team. And to be honest, I would not be at all surprised to see Perez right up there with him in Bahrain this weekend. Now, that's a line there that could come back to bite me very hard, but I hope that's not the case. I will say right now, though, that I don't expect him to come out on top in the teammate battle, but again, I think he will be closer. And I'd be surprised if it takes him a full 5 races to really get going. Checo, as we know, is a quick driver. He's proven that so many times over the last decade, really, and could well be the key to help Red Bull close that gap to Mercedes this year. And you know, that is ultimately his job, isn't it? On paper, it all sounds very lovely and simple, but he's there to back up Verstappen, keep himself in the mix at the front, and give the team options on strategy. And hopefully that will help them be able to take the fight to the world champions. Of course, though, cliche alert, races are not run on paper. And we've already seen 2 drivers fail to do that. But I have every confidence that Perez is the driver Red Bull needs to mount a serious title challenge. And I cannot wait to see him battling it out for regular podiums and maybe even a couple of wins too. Next up, it's Mick Schumacher. Now, Schumacher, of course, enters the 2021 F1 season as one of 3 rookies. And his debut is possibly the most anticipated of all of them. Well, at least in terms of the media coverage he seems to be getting. And you can understand why, given that he is the son of 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher, but he has also earned the right to a chance in Formula One based on his performances over the last few years. Racing in F2 last year, the German shone on his way to taking the title and showed just how good he is when going wheel to wheel on track. And indeed, in delivering consistency, and that's something that will be so important for Haas this season. And that's not even to mention the fact he also grabbed 2 wins and a total of 10 podiums. It was an impressive 2020 for Mick, so yeah, they are just some of the reasons why I'll be watching him with great interest this season. But that's not all. It does feel like this is becoming a bit of a cliche at this point, but it's true. Throughout his junior career, Schumacher has shown that not only does he have the speed, talent and potential, he also seems to take a little bit of time to get up to speed when joining a new series. We saw that when he debuted in F2 in 2019 and again in Euro F3 back in 2017. It will be interesting to see if that trend continues and if it does, how quickly he can get himself up to speed. What will help Mick on that front though, but not really on performance, is that Haas has already pretty much written off this season in terms of car development, so some of that pressure will have been lifted off him this year. I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say is if the team isn't expecting much in terms of performance from that car, that's going to allow Schumacher to be able to cut his teeth, if you like, away from some of that spotlight and give him the time he needs to get settled and up to speed. I think he will do well this year, I really do, but it could well be a bit of a frustrating one if that Haas does end up being well off the pace. Third on my list is Carlos Sainz. This won't come as much of a surprise given I've been getting excited about the idea of Sainz versus Leclerc at Ferrari since about May last year. There is a pressure, I've talked about it before, that comes with racing for Ferrari, but given the problems the team suffered last year, and you know, even the acceptance from Mattia Binotto that the team doesn't expect to be back to consistent winning ways until 2022, perhaps that pressure will be a little bit less than it has been in the past, and that could help Sainz to, well, like Schumacher, settle in a little bit. Now, of course, Sainz has been around in F1 since 2015, and so it may well be the case that he won't be afforded the time to find his feet in the same way a more inexperienced driver would. but he will still need time, as any driver will when moving to a new team. And Sainz excites me as a driver just generally. He has so much raw speed, and as I said a few weeks back, I feel still has a lot of untapped potential, a potential he was starting to show at McLaren. After all, in each of the last 2 years, Sainz has finished 6th in the standings and has impressed me so much with not only his speed, but how he goes about racing as well as his consistency. It'll be a tough task, absolutely. Leclerc was superb last season in what was a very disappointing car, and he is very much the focus of that team. But the lineup is one of several exciting ones we've got this year, and I honestly do feel as though he will get up to speed fairly swiftly and be right there with Leclerc in terms of pace. Again, a bit like I said about Perez, I don't think he's going to come out on top in the teammate battle, but I believe he will push Leclerc a lot harder in 2021 than Vettel did in 2020. And that's kind of what the team needs if they are going to be challenging for that third place in the standings. Don't forget that is Ferrari's minimum target for 2021. Whilst it's always interesting to see how well any rookie gets on in F1, the rookie I am most excited about this year is YUKI Tsunoda. Tsunoda was, for me at least, the biggest surprise in Formula 2 last year, grabbing 3 wins. That's one more than eventual champion Mick Schumacher. He also took 7 podiums and went on to finish 3rd in the standings, just 15 points off the title winner. That is all seriously impressive, but is even more impressive when you remember that 2020 was his first season in F2. And it wasn't just the impressive stats that grabbed my attention last year. His maturity, his ability to get moves done, his driving style overall just really shone through. And it's absolutely no surprise to me that AlphaTauri and of course Honda are impressed by all of that, as well as the potential he has, and gave him his chance in Formula One. It is also worth noting that his promotion to F1 is his 3rd promotion in as many years. In 2018, he was racing in F4 in Japan. He is now a Formula One driver. Quite the rise up the ranks. I mean, it should really go without saying that Formula One is a whole other animal, and just because he's enjoyed a strong junior career, it doesn't mean he will do the same in F1, and that goes for any driver, not just Tsunoda, any driver. But there is just something about him that makes me think he will do a seriously good job for AlphaTauri this year, and whilst Pierre Gasly did enjoy a really strong 2020, I honestly do feel as though Tsunoda will run him close this season, and I can see him surprising a few people this year. It is a very exciting driver lineup, and I can't wait to see how it all shakes out between them. Now, before I get on to my final pick, here are a couple of honourable mentions. Unsurprisingly, Fernando Alonso is a driver many will be watching closely this year. His return to F1 has been highly anticipated, and seeing the Spaniard back has got a lot of people very excited, and yes, that does include me. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see how quickly he returns to form after 2 years away, and how much of a difference he can make for Alpine in what will likely be an incredibly tightly packed midfield. And who knows, maybe he will be able to get himself back on the podium at some point in this season. It might be tough, but you can never really write off Fernando. And I feel as well like Pierre Gasly deserves a mention. As I've already said, he was so good last season, and he'll want to build on that in 2021. He's also going to want to stake a claim as team leader this season with YUKI Tsunoda coming in. And whilst watching him on track is something well worth getting excited for, it will also be worth keeping an eye on what happens off it. If he continues to impress, he could well find himself in demand. And yes, I do still have this feeling he will find himself in an Alpine sooner rather than later. Maybe 22, we'll see. Back to my 5 drivers to watch in 2021 though, and my final pick is, of course, Sebastian Vettel. I said a lot during the testing streams that the most intriguing driver lineup for me this year is Stroll and Vettel at Aston Martin. It has been a difficult couple of years for Vettel, and last year was an absolute disaster. So seeing what he can do this year in a whole new environment is so fascinating to me. He will, of course, want to bounce back immediately and show that he has still got what it takes to perform at the highest level. And I do firmly believe that he does. As Otmar Safnauer has said about him before, and indeed I think Sebastian Vettel said it of himself as well, he hasn't just forgotten how to drive. The question is, though, which Vettel is Aston Martin getting this year? Will it be the driver who has struggled of late, or will we see something closer to what we saw when he was winning titles? The answer is, of course, likely to be somewhere in between. That tends to be how these things work. One thing I do think will help him a lot this year is the lack of pressure at Aston versus Ferrari. Do not get me wrong. There is still going to be a lot of pressure on him. There is on every driver at every team in some way, but nowhere near the levels he will have experienced at Ferrari. What I want to say really is that Aston Martin is a brand new project, albeit with some extremely solid foundations. A great year last year for Racing Point, rear brake duct protests aside. And so immediate title-winning success isn't something he will have to concern himself with. That will give him the chance to find his feet at the team and look to, I suppose, grow with the team over the next year or so. He will absolutely be expected to perform, to pick up points and possibly even a podium or two, maybe a win, and perhaps he will, but 2021 feels like a transitional year for the sport as a whole, and maybe that's sort of how I feel about Vettel this year. Again, it's a new project and it's a fresh start for Vettel. Yeah, so maybe transitional is kind of how it feels, but I am genuinely really hopeful and optimistic for Vettel this season, even if testing didn't really go exactly to plan. We'll see what happens in the desert this weekend, where of course it really matters. So there we have it then. They were my 5 drivers to watch in 2021. Well, 7 if we include the honourable mentions. But let me know down in the comments section which drivers you are going to be keeping a very close eye on this season. That is it for this video then, but I will be back later this week with content covering the first race weekend of the new season. We are so nearly there. But in the meantime, if you did enjoy this video, then please do leave a like, as it really helps out the channel. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. Lots and lots to come over the next 9 months or so. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.